So we have as our speaker today Kevin Dahlman, and I became aware of the opportunity to invite Kevin to the club through Diane Kirby, who had seen Kevin at a different Rotary club, and so no expectations, but she said it was great, or no pressure, I should say. So Kevin Dalman is the third generation on his family farm near Cokato. They specialize in hybrid seed corn and seed soybeans. They produce, process, and wholesale their products to farmers throughout the world. Kevin has been farming for 35 years. He and his wife Nancy have 2 children, Tony and Pam. Kevin's primary role on the farm is president and general manager. He's passionate about farming and the need to speak out about what he does. Kevin has a degree in agricultural education from the University of Minnesota, and his off-farm experience includes work with Ag Reliant Genetics as a regional sales manager. Kevin, like many of us, is an active member of his community, serving as a member of the Independent Professional Seedsmen Association, not like most of us, Wright County Farm Bureau Board of Directors, Minnesota Crop Improvement Association, Minnesota State FFA Alumni Board, and he's a deacon at Our Saviour's Lutheran Church. Kevin was Minnesota Crop Improvement Association Premier Seedsman in 1995 and University of Minnesota Wright County Farm Family of the Year in 1991. In 2008, he received the Minnesota State FFA Honorary State FFA degree and the National Honorary American FFA degree in 2012. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Dahlman.
My name is Kevin Dahlman, and I am a farmer. I belong to a group of farmers throughout the state of Minnesota, all the way from Ada to Zumbrota. There's about 30 of us, and what we do is we go around and visit with civic organizations, groups such as Rotaries, Kiwanis, and so on, and we like to tell them about our farming operation. There's a lot of groups out there right now that are, for some reason or another, I think they're actually trying to destroy agriculture and agriculture as we know it. So what we're trying to do is put in front of you a real life farmer and spread the good word and the right word about farming. So as I go about today now, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to raise your hand. We'll stop. We'll try to get the question answered and moved on. I can say that I did speak to a Kiwanis group in North St. Paul, and it was an hour and a half later, I was still answering questions. I loved it. It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I enjoyed the opportunity to visit with many of you prior to this. I could hear all the chatter in the room as we started, and I said to Andrea, this must be a really social group, and she said that. So like I said, please feel free to raise your hand. Today you're going to hear a little bit about the birds and the bees. Now, it's not going to be X-rated, and it won't be a sex ed class type deal, but you're going to learn today about how little baby corn kernels are made. So, as we proceed forth, I think I have most of your attention here right now, don't I? My name is Kevin Dahlman, my wife Nancy there in the middle. We've been married for 35 years, and she's a purebred Norwegian. I'm mainly Swede, but we've gotten along pretty good so far. My son Tony on the far right, he also went to the University of Minnesota and graduated with a mathematics and statistics degree. And how he got his job was actually the United States Department of Agriculture come on campus. They were recruiting. They come into his stats class and they said, we're looking for a stats major, a junior, who's got a farm background. And out of 80 kids, he was the only one to raise his hand. So ultimately he got the job, led to an internship, led to a full-time job. He spent 3 years in Sioux Falls. Now he is in Washington, D.C. I don't know where he got the big city gene from. It must be a recessive gene of some sort because I'm a country boy, but he loves it out there. Small, narrow streets. He lives in a little row house type deal, but he loves it. He married a gal from Iowa who also happened to come from a farm and who also works for USDA. My daughter Pam there, the second one on the left, she currently works for the Minnesota Farm Bureau in marketing and communications. My future son-in-law, Jeff, on the far left, he works for General Mills in finance right there. A A little bit about me. I have been farming for 36 years. I did meet another St. Paul graduate. There we go. I did go to University of Minnesota and graduated with an ag ed degree, but my dad offered me a position to come back and farm with him. He needed help at the time, and I've never regretted it. I love farming. It's in my blood. The college experience was wonderful for me, but every morning I wake up and I want to go farming is what I do. I have been involved in several seed and crop organizations. I like to be involved civically, and I did spend 23 years on our local school board. So that's how I've kept my education involved in me too. I like youth also. I like working with kids. They're the one that keeps me young. The energy that they have, they're fun to be around. So I've been involved in 4-H and FFA activities. And then a graduate of the Minnesota Agriculture and Rural Leadership operation, in which we studied agriculture throughout the state, throughout the nation, and we actually spent 1 month in South Africa studying agriculture there. A little bit about our farm. I am a third-generation farm. The reason we're not fourth generation is my great-grandfather actually immigrated directly from Sweden. So my grandfather, Elben, had the farm. My dad took it over after he come back from World War II, and then us boys took it over in the 1980s. A little bit about my partners, and you talked about being a busy time. If I was back at the farm right now, we're still combining corn as we speak, and I'd probably be driving a truck or unloading one of the trucks or tending the dryers. I did have a dryer check last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and everything was working fine. I was back up there at 5:30, and the bin had gone empty and that part. But that's what we're doing right now. I'm the one on the left. My brother Dwayne in the middle, he's the one who helps run our processing and conditioning plant, and you'll hear more about that in a bit. My brother Craig is on the far right there, and he's responsible for our production. He used to be a mechanic at a John Deere dealership. He got tired of fixing everybody else's problems. He wanted to come home, break the machinery, and be able to fix it himself. Well, now we're growing to the point where he doesn't get to drive much anymore, so he's still fixing the problems that our hired men have done. So we tease him about that. A little bit about our operation. We grow hybrid seed corn and seed soybeans. Everything that we grow is planted by farmers the following year. When you go to the farm and fleet store and get a little vegetable packet or flour packet, somebody had to raise those someplace. Well, we raise the seeds that the farmers plant the following year. We farm about 3,000 plus acres ourselves, and then we have other farmers who raise for us about 1,500 acres. 100% of everything that we raise goes through our seed house at some point. We produce, process, and wholesale enough corn to plant about 350,000 acres the following year and 150,000 acres of soybeans. We're a rather small seed company by most standards, but for us, we're kind of proud of it. To know that we're just not a central Minnesota operation, we also have through a broker and through another agent, we have production in Argentina and Chile every year. So about now is when the corn is being planted down there, and it will be planted, harvested, processed, and come back to us in late March or early April. So in time for our local Minnesota farmers to start planting next May. Now, to know how things can have a big effect, does anybody maybe don't remember what might have happened in Chile middle of March last year? They had a big earthquake down there, huge earthquake. Guess what? It shut down all the ports. They couldn't ship anything out. Guess what? We couldn't get the corn that we'd raised out of Chile. So it took better than a month, and some of it we actually had to rail to some other places to get it to a different port that was operating. But do global things affect what we do here in central Minnesota? Absolutely. Fortunately, it was a very late spring last year. Farmers in central Minnesota didn't get into the fields until mid-late May at times. So we were able to get the seed back. But just a small thing of what can happen in the southern hemisphere can very much affect us here in Minnesota. Well,
advantageous to you to have production in the southern hemisphere?
okay, hang on. Anybody remember this song? So that was a popular song back in the 70s. I remember it. Some of you are too young for it. But okay, could you repeat your question again?
Why is it advantageous for you to have production in the southern hemisphere?
If you didn't hear the question, why is it advantageous to have production in the southern hemisphere? We can get 2 seasons out of 1 year is what we can do. We can double the amount of time that we can get product to our farmers. Several things occur in that. Let's say we have a hot hybrid, and it's a yield buster. It breaks every yield record. Well, we're maybe not going to have enough of it, what we grew for ourselves this summer. So we can take the parent stock down to South America, grow some, get it back here in time, and have enough to sell. Secondly, in case we have some sort of calamity up here, let's say we have a drought or a flood or whatever, and we don't harvest enough of a particular hybrid. We can send it down to South America, get enough produced, and get it back up here in time for our farmers to, so we can get 2 seasons out of 1 calendar year if we go to South America. Yep. Okay, a little bit about the birds and the bees here now. So we know that in any kind of reproduction, it takes males and females to get little babies. Corn is the same way. All plants are the same way. The little boutonniere or the little rose or the poinsettias that I heard you talking about, they have male and female parts in them. The corn plant is somewhat unique in that it actually has the male and female parts, but they're located on different parts of the plant. The male part comes from the tassel, which is at the top of the plant. That's the equivalent to the sperm or whatever. The tassel comes out of the plant, sheds its pollen grains, and the pollen grains then need to land on what we call the silk of the emerging ear of the plant. That silk is that brown stuff. If any of you ever eat sweet corn and you gotta, scrape that all off. The silk is actually, when it is ready to collect pollen grain, a long hollow straw. What it does is it collects the pollen grain. The pollen grain then travels up that long hollow straw. Each corn kernel has 1 silk attached to it that comes outside. The pollen grain travels up that silk. It gets into where the corn kernel is. The pollen grain then meets the so-called egg, and that is where fertilization occurred. And when that happens, we now have our new little bundle of joy. That is how we get baby corn kernels, is right there. So, what's the visiting hours? Good question. However, typically, if you want to see any action out in the cornfield, typically the tassel usually sheds its pollen grains between 10 and 12 during the day. Now, it can do it all day, but the bulk of the pollen shed occurs between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock during the morning hour. So in terms of visiting hour, if you have to close your eyes, that would be the 2 hours that you should be a little bit careful. In my job, we have 3 major stress times. Now, every occupation has its own stress time. If you're a lawyer and you're before a judge or something, that's probably a stress time. I heard you were a CPA, tax time might be a stress time. Everybody has their stress time. There's a reason I don't have any hair on my head anymore, because I've had many seasons of these stress times. This is what a regular cornfield looks like. All the plants, look pretty uniform or the same. But when we do our seed corn, we have 2 different distinct kinds of corns in the field. We have the inbreds that we've designated as male and the inbreds that we've designated as female. Now, we all know that the cow's got to be in heat when you put the bull in the pen. Timing's got to be right. The same thing has to happen in seed corn. The male has to be shedding its pollen at the same time as the female ears, and that silk is viable. If they miss by 2 or 3 days, you're not going to get those little baby kernels of corn. So what we have to do, let's say, and in this particular example, we have a male, and you can see it's a little bit taller than the rest of them. That's a 100-day male. It would mature in 100 days. And we want to cross it with this female that would mature in 80 days. If you were to plant them at the same time, the timing would not be right. The female silks would be all dried up and not receptive by the time the male was even, because it's 20 days later. So we need to plant them at separate times. In this particular case, we will go out and plant that male corn, and then roughly 20 days later, we will come and plant the female corn. Now everything can be fine until day 18, you get 4 inches of rain. And you can't travel in the field. It's too muddy. What do you do? Well, there's a reason I don't have any hair on my head again. We worry a lot. Here's what we do. We watch the weather forecast very diligently. If it looks like a front is coming through, maybe we'll go out at day 18 and plant the corn a little bit later in hopes that it comes up. Or if it looks like it's just a passing quick one, we'll roll the dice. Maybe if we didn't get very much rain, we will plant it on day 21 or day 22 and hope that we hit. But we're always very happy when we finally get all the males and the females in, and we hope that we get them in on time. We have missed many times where the male hasn't been shedding pollen when the female is receptive, or the other way around. And that's just, part of the trade type deal there. So stress time in the spring, absolutely. We want to make sure that we're planting the males and the females at the appropriate time. Just someone asked for some pictures. This is a picture of us preparing a field. One thing I want you to look at is the yellow globe that's at the top of the tractor there. We talked earlier before here about technology. That is our technology. That is GPS technology right there, where that goes up via satellite. That will entirely map out the field. That will have what we call auto steer in there, so that you literally do not have to have your hand on the steering wheel. It's the same technology that they use at MSP Airport to bring the airplanes down in the center of the runway. And we can literally, once we turn the corner, press the button, we can take our hands off the steering wheel and the tractor will drive itself. And it will drive itself down to within 2 inches of where we need to be. That's how close that we can be. So it's not perfect. We still need to have an operator in there, but we have GPS technology in just about everything that we have. I talked earlier with a gentleman about rocks. Unfortunately, the good Lord kept rocks here to keep us humble. We still have rocks. Most of our rocks are about a foot or so in diameter. However, there is no GPS to figure out where they are. So we have to go find them. The old days, we used to have to pick them by hand. This is a rock picker that we use right now, a little bit of a fork that scoops the rock up and puts it into the basket. We have to pick our rocks, otherwise it tears our equipment apart. This is a fertilizer spreader where we, notice the ball on the top again, we deliver the right amount of fertilizer in the right place at the right time, and that machine tells us to do that. So that we're not over-fertilizing, we're not under-fertilizing, we're getting the right N, P, and K in the right places. We map out everything so that we know exactly what to put where right there. So it's part of our stewardship program so that we don't get nitrates in the water, we don't get phosphorus in the lakes. We get the right amount at the right place. So that's what our GPS is doing right there. This is our planter. We plant 24 rows at a time. And there again, this is all GPS run there. So literally when we turn the corner, we plant it, we press the button, and we can let the tractor drive itself. That's how you can get nice straight rows too. So
how do you do that when you've got the male and female? Because you're planting them at different times.
Okay, good questions. Can we back up here? And let's see. I won't back up. We have 2 different boxes. on the planter. So we'll put the male in one box, or we'll put the female in the other, and then we just send the tubes to the right rows to put them in. Yes, we can. However, most of the time we don't. Most of the time we're planting either the male or the female, and then we have to come back with a different planter to plant it. Yep. Any of you who ever plant trees or flowers or whatever, what do you do when you plant it? You take your hand and you kind of poke, press the soil in and get it nice and firm there. We do the same thing, except we do it 40 feet at a time with a big steel roller. After we've planted our corn or our soybeans, we take that roller and we drive up and down the field, and it firms up the soil. It gives you good seed soil contact so that the plants will probably germinate better. So the same practices you use in your garden or your yard, we do the same thing except on a much larger scale. We do spraying. We need to kill some of the weeds that are out there. We need to control some of the insects that are there. We need to control some of the diseases that are there. Again, I want you to look at the little yellow ball that's on top there. Again, that's part of our stewardship program, where we don't over-apply, we don't under-apply, we get the right amount of pesticide there so that we're doing what we need to without any excess. There again, this machine is all GPS driven so that we can spray the right amount of stuff in there. Yes?
Kevin, that GPS doesn't tell you how much to put down. I mean, you have to program that. You have to go out there and get samples, I assume.
Yes, we do.
Soil.
Yep.
And you put that in your computer.
Yes.
And you got all these different samples per acre. Do you take more than one sample to?
Oh, big time. We separate everything into 2.5 acre grids. It'd be impractical to probably take one sample out of every acre. So we have everything mapped out, so it's in about 2.5 acre grids, so that the machine, you're correct, and what we do is we punch in a jump drive or flash drive into the machine that has the entire field mapped out, and by GPS coordinates, it knows exactly where the machine is. The machine then is programmed to know how much herbicide or how much fertilizer to put at that given spot.
I mean, is that done at the time? That's done ahead of all?
Yes, yes. What we do, and I don't have a picture of that, where we go out with an ATV or a soil sampling machine and draw the sample. We send it in to the university for analysis, and they'll come back and say, you need 100 pounds of N, 40 pounds of P, 200 pounds of K on this particular grid. The machinery will then be able to deliver that. Yes.
You see a lot of the small grains going to the airplane and
Yes.
producing that. How does that work? It sounds like this is more exacting for you versus delivering that fertilizer or the herbicide by airplanes. You still see that a lot.
Oh, very much so. There's a fair amount of aerial application, especially out in the Red River Valley in the Dakotas, where they don't have as many trees and power lines and obstacles as we do. The airplanes also have the same type of technology, and they can do that. Yes, they can. Yep. Yes. We typically do it every other year. You could do it every year if you wanted to, but we have enough historical data so that we know that if we took off 200 bushel corn, it probably removed this amount of nutrients out of the soil. So some do it every year. We found that is unnecessary. We can do it every other year. So stress number 2 is detasseling time. This is usually occurs about mid-July to early August sometime. Remember, going back to our anatomy of our corn plant, I talked about the male plants and the female plants. However, the female plants still have a male part to them on the top. They still will produce a tassel at the top. So what we have to do when we produce our little baby corn kernels is we literally have to castrate the females. Think about that a little bit. But we need to take off the tassel of the female plant so that it can only receive pollen from the male plants. So what we do is if we have machines, and I'll show you that in a little bit, where we have to go through and remove the tassel of the female plants in order to get our hybrid seed production. So what we do is we go through and detassel all the females. Now when we plant, we have it staggered here where you can see the darker ones are the male, and the lighter colored ones are the female. Typically we're in a 1-4 combination, 1 male and then 4 female, 1 male and then 4 females. So what we do is we have a machine like this that goes through 2 types of machines. One of them has rubber wheels on it where, if you remember the old wash machine ringers type deal, it rotate like that and it literally pulls the tassel out. We also have another machine that has like a lawnmower blade on the top and comes along and literally cuts the tassel off. Keep in mind we're only cutting the tassel off of the female plants. However, corn plants are kind of like people. Some are tall and some are short. Some are Democrats and lean to the left, and some are Republicans and lean to the right. They all don't come into the machine. Machines only get about 70-75% of the plants. So we need to follow up those machines in with kids. Hand labor. They literally walk up and down the rows and get the plants that the tassels that the machine missed. So every year we hire about 200 or so local kids. They'll walk up and down those rows, and typically they got probably walk it 2 or 3 times because not all the plants mature at the same time. So sometimes you can walk by one, and then you come out there the next day, and there it is. Tassel happened to come out. So we hire these kids. In our area, we're typically able to hire enough kids in the Dahlman, Cokato area. It's kind of a rite of passage. You start in about 7th grade till about 10th grade when you get your driver's license. Then the grass is greener on the other side and you can drive and get a better job. Detasseling is hard work. It's wet, it's muddy, it's hot, it's long days. You typically have 24 to 36 hours to remove that tassel, or otherwise it might pollinate itself and then you no longer have seed. So we hire these kids. It's a fun time, though. Again, I talked about being around kids. They'll complain and they'll whine, but tell you, the last day when they get that check, and most of them get about 150 hours in a year, and some of them, their check was over $1,000. Their eyes get all buggy-eyed. Boy, what can I do with this? We got some kids that spend the whole thing. Some kids save the whole thing. We have bought more iPads or clothes or whatever for kids than a lot of others have. A lot of them know it's the first time into reality and they see this line called FICA. Why did you take money away from me anyway? And I just say thank you for funding my retirement. So, yes.
One of the curiosities about moving to Minnesota was CCO's reports instructing detasseling crews to report or not.
Exactly.
Why are they giving last-minute instructions to detasseling crews?
So sometimes if the weather is bad, they have to delay or whatever once in a while. But they're there just as a message that you need to report at a certain time or whatever. Historically, even if the front comes through, the old saying, rain before 7 is done before 11. If it's raining in the morning, we'll wait it out until the sun shines and then we go to work. That's where it can be really, really muddy and so on. Yes?
When you detassel, Kevin, I'm not familiar with it. I never had that great opportunity. I'm sorry I missed it.
All right.
They could probably arrange it for you.
We do not discriminate on age.
Pull, or how do you get the tassel off and then you just drop it on the ground?
Yes. All of the above. We cut, we pull, and then we also hand walk, and the tassel is literally thrown on the ground. It eventually decays away by the time, but that's all done before there's any pollen on those female tassels. Yep. Yes.
Do you need to detassel corn other than seed corn and your 4:1 ratio that's done for seed?
No, the answer is no. The only people that need to detassel are those that are producing seed. Traditional regular farmer does not need to detassel.
And then the 4:1 ratio, that's only for seed too?
That's only for seed also. Yep. Another question? Same question? Okay. So, okay, to get a little bit creative, Minnesota actually has a law that says if you use a bus for non-school purposes, it can't be that orange-yellow color. So my brother Craig got a little bit creative one day, and he painted one green, one blue, one pink, another blue, and another green type deal. It's actually worked out pretty well, though, when we have 5 different crews here, and Mom needs to pick up Sally or John or whatever. Just look for the pink bus. They'll be in that field. So it's actually worked out pretty well. So stress number 3, harvest time. We've now created all our little baby corn kernels. We have to do something with them. We have to pick them. However, Mother Nature is throwing in another little curve at us that makes it very, very challenging for us in the fall. We all know what happens when water freezes. It expands. If we have a frost in the fall, an early frost, what will happen is the water inside the corn kernel will freeze, expand, and damage or kill the germ part of that corn kernel. Kind of almost like popcorn. That being said, if we have corn that doesn't germinate, we don't have very good seed corn. So typically the average killing frost in central Minnesota here is that first week of October, October 3rd, October 4th. So that means half the time it comes before that, half the time it comes after. We were very fortunate this year in that it was a quite late killing frost. So because the moisture content is very high in our seed corn, we must pick it before that frost comes. So we start shortly after Labor Day and continue picking until we get done. So we must harvest those female ears early in September before the first killing frost. We pick it into those dump carts. We put them into another dump cart. We bring it to our facility to remove all the husk that is on there. Just like your sweet corn, you take all the husk off before you can eat it. We take all the husk off, and we run it across long inspection belts to sort out any good ears and bad ears there. We put it into bins and dry it down. We dry it down at a very slow rate to maintain the quality and the germination. So fall is a very stressful time. I'm very happy when we're able to bring in all the seed corn, especially before the killing frost comes. So starting to wrap up here, why do I do what I do? Going to just briefly touch on a few things. Genetically enhanced corn and soybeans are safe and positive. The use of biotechnology has significantly reduced the amount of pesticides. There's a lot of concern about GMOs out there right now. GMOs have been in the industry for 20 plus years now, and I do believe that that is the way that we are going to feed the 9 billion people that are going to be on this earth here by 2040, 2050. Secondly, a few years ago, there was a real concern that China was coming in and buying up all our land. Who owns the land here in America? So the USDA actually conducted a study, and they found out that 98% of the farms are still owned by families like myself. Now, we're a corporation. We got an S Corp and we have a C Corp in our operation. But my 3 brothers, or excuse me, myself and my 2 brothers, were the owners. We're very much a family corporation there. United States consumers spends the lowest amount of their dollar on food than any other people in the whole world. We spend roughly 10% of all your dollars for food. Now, what would happen if you were going to have to spend 40% of your dollar just to eat? What wouldn't you be able to buy? You wouldn't be able to probably buy that car, or wouldn't maybe be able to finance an education for your son or daughter. Or there'd be a lot of things. So the United States has tried to maintain a cheap food policy in America, and at this point we still deliver the safest, most abundant, cheapest food here of anybody in the nation. I want to thank the people who help sponsor me, Minnesota Farm Bureau, Minnesota Corn Growers Association, and the Farm Credit Services of America. They're the ones who help get me around to every place. Lastly, my name is Kevin Dahlman. I am a farmer, and I would entertain any more questions at this time.
How much do you rely on Farmer's Almanac?
Question is, how much do I rely on Farmer's Almanac? I do read it, more for curiosity than anything.
It's a nice table.
Oh, yes. And that's probably all it is a table deck. And if you're the editor of it, I apologize. But we rely on about 3 or 4 major weather reporting operations to try to get the information as to what we're going to do for the day. I will be around afterwards. I would love to talk to you. I would love to be able to answer any questions that you have. But lastly, you may never look at a cornfield quite the same. Thank you again.